Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Dex. Dex.
Excellent.
Dexterity is the ability score we will be analyzing today, which is, in theme with, pirates. They're, swinging from ropes on ships and stuff. And heck, if there wasn't some kind of crazy pirate action at the top of the standings this week at the Dallas Open.
And I just want to be clear. We're checking dexterity and not wisdom or intelligence.
Oh. That's actually we can check off some of those boxes, but let's start with dexterity. Well, maybe I don't know. Is taking hostages, is that more of a wisdom check or what?
I don't know. See, I think do you have the Scarab God in your deck? That's an intelligence check.
I think that's a wisdom. That's practical.
That's wisdom? Okay, well in that case, Hostage Taker is definitely intelligence.
Okay.
Hostage Taker is one of the best cards in Ixalan, and here we see it as a 4X in Andrew Jessup's Standard Open winning deck, Sultai Energy.
So, this deck, it was a little surprising to me. I thought a bit about Sultai Energy decks, but I thought that Temur would be the energy deck of choice just to begin with the format with, right? But here we have Sultai, which is basically a new archetype.
Wait, why? Why Temur?
Because I think I'm a little biased on this. As somebody who's largely played red decks in the previous format, the card I was most scared of coming out of energy decks was Whirler Virtuoso. And this deck ain't got no Whirler Virtuoso.
Oh, yeah, I know. You could play Whirler Virtuoso if you wanted.
Yeah?
It just seems like... Well, no, it's just... You obviously aren't going to play Temur. Right? Temur doesn't cast the Scarab God.
Temur casts... I think the 4-color with... It's just Temur with the Scarab God is really just Temur.
Oh, you mean 4-color?
They have 4 color.
Oh, okay. So that's not an insane strategy. Then I think 4-color sounds pretty good.
All right, well, let's talk about
anyway,
this 3-color
Sultai, yes. To begin with, what do you think of these 2-drops, man? Winding Constrictor, Glint-Sleeve, Siphoner, Walking Ballista, and Long Tusk Cub.
So, this deck is even though it's kind of labeled as an energy deck, and we're probably, anyway, I'm kind of thinking about this as the slot inheritor to Temur in the format, it really is very reminiscent of the black-green energy deck, right? That kind of Winding Constrictor deck, and that is kind of its immediate evolutionary predecessor in some ways anyway, right? That, this deck has got the Glint Sleeve Siphoner action. It has Rishkar Pima Renegade. It has Winding Constrictor into Walking Ballista, right? It has these things going on, and it even has Blossoming Defense, which I think is really interesting in this deck. So it's like that.
Well,
it's
Blossoming Defense is important. That's one half of the Splinter Twin combo. Seriously, Matt Nass and Andrew Beckstrom were talking about it this weekend, that was the technology was that Jessup just busted out Splinter Twin. If you assemble the combo of Hostage Taker plus Blossoming Defense, you win.
Yeah, so you can take their best thing, and then the potential downside on Hostage Taker is that there's a window, at least theoretically, where the opponent can remove your Hostage Taker from play and then get their thing back, right? But if you stop them from doing that with a Blossoming Defense, you could untap and cast a 7 or something if it's underneath the Hostage Taker.
True.
Yeah.
Although often you don't want to cast a 7. You frequently want to be casting a 6.
It depends. It depends
or a 5.
What casting cost the opponent's thing was. I can tell you, I crazily played Magic Online until 5 a.m. Friday night because I was so excited to play with Ixalan Standard. And I had my Wakening Sun's avatar stolen by a Hostage Taker. That was pretty cool. Then my next Wakening Sun's avatar didn't kill the first one when I cast it the next turn.
But their Awakening Sun's avatar didn't kill their own Hostage Taker.
Nope, it did not because it was not cast from hand.
Right.
Yeah, there was all kinds of text going on in that matchup. But I'm just saying, could cast a 7 casting cost. I'm sorry, is it 8? 8 casting cost triple white spell. No problem with the text on that Hostage Taker.
So as unreal as Hostage Taker is and was and will continue to be and will expand its beingness, this deck also has some pretty exciting technology out of the sideboard. To begin with, at the top, I mean, obviously the Scarab God, no big surprise, but at the tippity top, Vraska Relic Seeker, 1 copy. So Vraska the Seeker at the top of the curve is kind of an exciting, different dimension for a deck that it already has access to both artifact and creature removal. I mean, creature removal, who doesn't, right? But Hostage Taker already does a dynamite job of making sure that Jessup isn't vulnerable to vehicles or any stray artifact that may need to get hostage took. However, Vraska opens up the option of also being able to hit enchantments. But what's more, Vraska is just a dominating board presence against other creature matchups. If you can drop Vraska and kill a creature, you'll often have just accomplished some super great tempo play to begin with, where you're playing a bomb permanent, getting rid of a bomb permanent, and then you're getting a treasure, and that treasure is perfect for a deck with 4 Fatal Push, 4 Blossoming Defense, and in the sideboard, 4 Duress and a Spell Pierce. That's so many ways to leverage the treasure to follow up Vraska to make it a 3 big plays in 1 turn. And then what's more, Vraska starts with so ungodly much loyalty that you just can go Vraska plus against non-black decks. And now it's like a Gideon that just is going up 2 loyalty a turn while also just having so giant of a buffer of health. And if your opponent doesn't find a way to interact with it really quickly, it can just kill them, because the ultimate only takes 2 pluses before you have turned on. And if you can set your opponent's health to 1, a Walking Ballista X's them on the spot.
Oh, that's a great point. Just a note on that treasure, all the spells in the main deck, every single one costs 1, right? So
the sorceries and instants, yeah.
It's as do you think that Vraska will be even more popular than like a one of potentially coming up? It's really powerful, I think, as even just like double Vindicate, right? Like 6 mana for 2 Vindicates. You can do worse.
Yeah, I don't know if like you could do worse. I think the double Vindicate plan is a good part of it, but like I think that it's hard to use a ton of Vraskas. Like, she's a lot more like she's one of those niche ones where you can put 1 here, 1 there. Occasionally there will be 2, and plenty of the time there'll be 0. She's not like she's not the sort of Elspeth 6 type of thing where you're just slamming tons of them, I don't think.
But on the subject of Vraska's, Vraska's Contempt is a 2 of in Jessup's sideboard. This card is just awesome, I think.
Oh yeah.
I like it more and more every single time I look at it. So it's real comparable to an Utter End, but I love the gaining 2 life aspect of it. And I mean, it's obviously not as flexible as an Utter End, but it's also not in 2 different colors.
No, what do you mean it's not as flexible? I mean, you gain 2 life.
Yeah, but an Utter End can kill different kinds of permanents than this. I really like this card. The fact that it exiles is awesome because, there's things that are very durable. For example, the Scarab God cannot stand up to Vraska's Contempt. Vraska gives the Scarab God a nasty look and just bypasses the graveyard, goes straight to whatever's next to the graveyard, never comes back.
I mean, that's part of why Blossoming Defense is so sick.
Yeah, Blossoming Defense is just looks like a little mini renaissance for this card.
Yep.
I think this is a really inventive deck.
Oh, yeah, definitely. This is a really, really, really cool list. But there's actually one more piece of technology. The full play... Actually, there's 2, I guess. I mean, but Duress hardly counts. Everybody knows. Yeah, okay, you have 4 Duresses. That's really good. That's sweet. And I guess Spell Pierce, too. Geez, this sideboard is just loaded, right?
It's awesome against, like, decks that need to use non-creature spells to defend themselves. Like if you're relying on Fumigate, man, you don't want to play against Spell Pierce and Negate, right?
Yeah, particularly somebody who's got the mix of 4 Duress, 2 Negate, and a Spell Pierce, so they're just hitting you from lots of angles. What do you think of Death?
Well, I just think that it has to maybe load some of that stuff. Like the main deck is not particularly well set up to play against non-interactive decks.
No, I like it. I'm not criticizing at all. I'm saying that if you're playing a bunch of Fumigates, it sucks for you when they Duress and Negate and Spell Pierce you into next Tuesday.
Oh, I mean, Spell Pierce is the worst, though. It's the absolute worst.
What I'm wondering is, what do you think of this playset of Death Gorge Scavengers?
Death Gorge Scavenger is a Death Gorge Scavenger. It's a new dinosaur. It's 3/2 for 2 and a G. And it has the text, whenever Death Gorge Scavenger enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card is exiled this way, you gain 2 life. If a non-creature card is exiled this way, Death Gorge Scavenger gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So obviously this card is like, it's for you play it the first time for 3, you can take out one thing in the graveyard, right? But then you can get this ability multiple times over the course of the game, provided it doesn't die along the way. And it gets some small bonuses along the way, like gaining life and potentially getting bigger itself. How do I like it? I wonder what you'd be going after. Maybe against God Pharaoh's Gift decks, maybe against Scarab God decks, just like depleting some fuel.
So, I think first and foremost, killing people's the Scarab God. The fact that you can hit the Scarab God with a card that is incidentally good on its own, it's not insane, but it's pretty good. It's convenient that the Death Gorge Scavenger costs 3 instead of 2, so that it's like decent against other people's fatal pushes. And then importantly, Death Gorge Scavenger obviously it's fantastic against the God Pharaoh's Gift people, but it also is a good tool against red aggro, actually. Being able to put it down and get 2 life, and it's not that it's like half of a Kitchen Finks or whatever, some amazing thing. It's just that you have lots of other must-kill creatures, and getting that extra life can be a little bit of a nice way to offset the amount of unable to block action that they have going.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, if you play this against a mono red deck, and then gain 2 life just when you play it, they probably have to interact with it, right? Like, it's only a 3/2, so whether they're spending, I don't know, a shock of some sort to kill it, or a magma spray or something to get rid of it, that's okay, because just the 2 life was able to just to pay you back even for the shock that they played, which is great. It's kind of like card advantage. But this creature actually matches up really well with all their guys who don't happen to be indestructible gods, right? He pretty much trades with everybody.
And then there's actually a couple other applications. Against Approach, Death Gorge Scavenger is actually very effective at slowing a search for Azcanta. By exiling the fact that you're hitting one every turn, you can actually often you can delay a search for Azcanta for multiple turns.
Oh, I hadn't thought about
from
that
flipping.
Application. Yeah.
And then, and hitting for 4 all the while. And then finally, obviously, if you face anybody who happens to be on some cut-to-ribbon, scrap-heap scrounger type of time, Death Gorge Scavenger has applications there.
Yeah, I mean, it can even just, take some options away from a Torrential Gearhulk deck, right? Like, just make their Gearhulk a little bit worse. Stuff like that.
Yeah, plus, I mean, it is kind of great to just put a Champion of Wits into the exile, getting rid of that particular type of problem.
Yeah, it's like... Yeah. It's fine. Like, a 3/2 for 3 is nothing to write home about, but just like a little bonus is actually representative of some card economy in a lot of matchups, and he's hitting for maybe 4, maybe gaining some life where that's relevant.
So anyway, this is definitely super, super cool deck, and a great showing by Jessup. There were some other immediate impacts from Ixalan all over. So even though the second place deck was Ixalan free, basically. I mean, there's Lightning Strike, but this we should talk about this one anyway, just because this is sort of a great example of the new style of red, which is Tad McCarrick. Apologize on the name, but playing a red aggro, a ramen up red deck with Bomat Courier, Soul Scar Mage, and calling it a day on the 1-drops there.
Yeah, so he's got 4 copies of Soul Scar Mage in the main deck. So Soul Scar Mage was typically maybe a 2 of, or like the least popular of the 1-drops in the, not never played, right, but the least popular 1-drops from the previous format in the mono red deck. But then like no other replacement. So like no, was it the 1/1 that gets +1/+1 if you attacked? None of that guy. Obviously, you know, the various like 2/1s for 1 or incremental 1/1 hasters have rotated. So kind of scraping the bottom of the 1-drops here. But he's got like 12 burn spells. So 4 Abrade, 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Shock, as well as 24 land in the main deck. So there's a various amount of lands you could play in a mono red deck. Typically, you might see 24. Sometimes you see 23. Usually you see some in the sideboard.
But notably, he's got 4 Chandra's defeats as well. Just so much 1-for-1 point Olim.
Well, so just the note on Chandra's defeat, that's a card that's been pretty hot and cold in red decks. You know, sometimes you see it as, you know, a multiple of, as many as 4 of. Oftentimes you see none. I think that in Tad McCarrick's deck, because he's got 4 copies of Soul Scar Mage, that Chandra's Defeat is better than it is in some other builds. Just in particular, the combination of Chandra's Defeat and Soul Scar Mage allows you to interact profitably against an opponent's Hazoret. You can actually kill a Hazoret that way. And now, you know, anyone who's played the mono red mirror match knows how difficult Hazoret is to deal with.
Absolutely. Now, there was some other Robin Up Red technology from Ixalan. 11th place finisher Mickey Humphreys was packing 3 Rigging Runners in the main deck, and his sideboard containing 2 Rampaging Ferocidons and Avance's Blasting Cannons.
Yeah, so Rigging Runner is that he's that 1/1 creature for R.
First strike.
He's got first strike to start, and then he's a little bit bigger if you rated. So he's kind of this creature who's of 2 minds, right? Like, you want to play him if you're going to play him, because one mode that you have on Rigging Runner is just to play him on the first turn, and you just get your game going. But if you play him that way, he kind of stinks, right? He's just a 1/1, and he's never going to raid up. But yeah, the trade-off is maybe you'll get 2 or 3 damage in with him that you might not have gotten otherwise. But, you know, his upside is different than that. Yeah, interestingly, Mickey's got fewer burn spells, right? He's down to 9, although 4 Lightning Strike, 3 Abrade, 2 Shock. I think it's an interesting distribution. I'm not sure how I feel about that one yet. But also 24 lands in the main deck.
Yep. You have to be able to play the more mid-range game after sideboarding. That's sort of the bread and butter of aggro decks these days.
So he's got a couple of cards that I think kind of have some implications just past, you know, their name in a deck list or something. One of those is Vance's Blasting Cannons. You very, very commonly see these red decks play incremental land in the sideboard. And Vance's Blasting Cannons is kind of an incremental land, right? So when you see that kind of taking that spot, Patrick, where we've seen everything from a mountain.
No, I don't see Vance's Blasting Cannons taking the spot of a land in the sideboard. Like, we're going to keep seeing land in the sideboard. I think that they're somewhat unconnected. I don't think Vance's Blasting Cannons is a reason to play less land in your sideboard, but instead play it. I mean, like, for instance, Tad didn't have Vance's Blasting Cannons in his sideboard, but he did have 3 Chandras. Like, 3 Chandras in the sideboard and 1 in the main deck. why would that be comparable to a Vance's blast? Actually, let me pull back a second. Why is Vance's blasting cannons like a land in the sideboard?
Because it's a land sometimes.
When you flip it?
Yeah. It kind of serves that purpose, right? Like
No! The purpose of Vance's blasting cannons isn't to produce a 5th mana for your Glory Bringer. The point is to either be Outpost Siege or Superpower Curse Scroll type Valakut land. That's not land like make mana. Yeah, you can tap it that way, but it's definitely taking the spot of other 4-mana threats like Chandra.
Okay.
I don't know, man. That just seems like such a hard way to get your 5th mana if that's the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's got Harsh Mentor, which is a card we hadn't seen in high numbers before in these kind of decks. So that's a 4 of here. Rampaging Ferocidon. The thing about Rampaging Ferocidon to me is, I would assume you bring this in against blue-white decks, right? They're going to be bringing in Caracals, Authority of the Consuls, and of course, like one of their core strategies is probably based around Approach of the Second Sun. What do you think about that in those matchups? This doesn't even really do anything against an approach itself, right? I guess it blunts it a little.
Yeah, it's not very good against approach, all things considered. I don't know. It's okay though. I mean, it's a threat that them not getting 7 life is something. Like, that's a pretty big speed bump.
I guess they definitely have to deal with it. That's part of it. And I think, like, when you're in the blue-white side, you just put these aggro decks in the lockdown sometimes when you have, like, Authority of the Council and then, like, one thing that's bigger than their stuff on average. And I think this really, it could blunt that part of the strategy.
Yeah. It's also kind of nice against Angel of Invention. If you play against one of these, like, Vona, Angel of Invention, God Pharaoh's gift decks.
Yeah, the extra... Like you're still going to get run over, though, if they have that stuff going.
I don't know. Sometimes you'll have them at low enough life, particularly if they're not gaining any.
Yeah.
There is actually one more red deck with a little bit different of a twist. David Pierce's 46th place list was a red deck splashing Unlicensed Disintegration, a card I know you historically have been a big fan of, and helping enable the splash in addition to his 4 Dragon Skull Summit and 1 Swamp. He also has 3 Captain Lannery Storm, which serve the dual purpose of helping enable the Unlicensed Disintegration's artifact criteria, if it comes to that.
Yeah, I love Unlicensed Disintegration in the Ramming Up Red strategy. Obviously, just in the abstract, Unlicensed Disintegration is basically more powerful than any of the cards that the Ramming Up Red deck typically plays, with the possible exception of Hazoret. But it's just this great card.
No, it's definitely stronger than Hazoret.
Possible exception. I mean, it's just better than everything then, right? The cards that you typically play. But the thing that's interesting about it is it's actually not that hard to set it up and get value. Like, the default version of Ramming Up Red already just plays Bomat Courier, right? So he's swapping in Scrap Heap Scroungers. He's like, all right, here's this, which is a reasonable 2. And if you've got black mana for Unlicensed Disintegration to cast it anyway, you're going to get some value off Scrap Heap Scrounger anyway. Like you said, Captain Lannery Storm's there to hook you up. But also, he went the Pia Nalar route main deck. So Pia Nalar has been kind of a minority player for main deck and Ramming Up Red. I think we saw it as many as 3 copies in the main deck in some versions from the National Championships last month. But it's typically a sideboard card. But if you've got Pia in the main deck, Captain Lannery Storm, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Bomat Courier, that's quite a few artifacts to get Unlicensed Disintegration set up.
Oh yeah, plus you get to upgrade one of your 1-drops into Inventor's Apprentice. Getting to play Inventor's Apprentice instead of like the Rigger or something in that space.
Yeah, all of the one
or the
drops
Soul Scar Mage
in red that aren't Bomat Courier are not. They're just not that exciting. They're kind of like table stakes, and versus Inventor's Apprentice is, because arguably a big format card. It's Curd Ape and very very much 2 power for 1 mana.
Yeah. So we've been talking about blue-white approach. The highest finishing blue-white approach was David Thomas's 4th place list, right?
Yeah, there were multiple in the top 8, right?
Yeah.
So Thomas's deck had like not an outlandish stretch, but something that was blue-white approach players were dipping their toes into for a while, which is Gideon of the Trials in the main deck. I think the main thing about Gideon of the Trials, if you're going to play it, it's at all-time high in the mirror match for 2 reasons. The more important of which is that Blessed Alliance rotated, right? So before, you might have Gideon of the Trials and then never attack with it, because you'd be terrified it got killed by Blessed Alliance, which is otherwise dead. But if you just land Gideon of the Trials, especially on the play, in the mirror match, and then immediately Emblem, it is so difficult for the opponent to win.
They mainly have to win with, they have 4 cast outs, right, that they can use on your Gideon?
Yeah, but the timing on that's so tough, because they'll have to do something like cast you out on your turn, untap and approach, and they've just got this giant window to potentially mess them up there. It's obviously doable, but it's not a very convenient spot for an approach player in the mirror match. Separately, Gideon of the Trials, which I think is a little at odds in David's deck, one of the other applications of it that's really strong is against decks that play multiple threats. You can use Gideon to negate their first threat, force them to commit additional resources to the board, and then get card advantage with Fumigate, but he only plays 2 Fumigates.
Well, that's because he's got 3 Settle the Wreckage, so he's actually got 5 sweepers. He's just playing 3 of the better one.
So you think Settle the Wreckage is the better sweeper in white?
Oh, I don't know, but it's close. Settle the Wreckage is excellent. I think Fumigate's actually better, but I think Settle the Wreckage is better in some metagames. Being able to go after haste creatures is so good. Settle the Wreckage, though, is absolutely fantastic, and having 3 copies of it here it's a good look, I think.
Yeah, I think there are different ways you can go with white sweepers and approach. One of the huge advantages of Settle the Wreckage is, it's obviously good against haste creatures because it's an instant, but the fact that you can take out Hazoret with it successfully is just such a big bonus, because that card, well, it's decent for a blue-white deck to be able to deal with Hazoret, but it's still inconvenient, right? You've got a limited number of things that can interact with it. I think that's a big one.
Well, it's also important that after sideboarding, to begin with, the sideboard has 4 Regal Caracals and 2 Torrential Gearhulks. The 2 Torrential Gearhulks can obviously flash back the Settle the Wreckage. That's a really big game, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the second, 4 Regal Caracals makes it so that you're going to appreciate both not being 5 flooded and the fact that if you have Regal Caracal in play, you don't end up in this spot where you're like, well, my hand is Fumigate and Regal Caracal. I guess I can kill my own cats.
Hey, you're probably going to gain some extra life there, though. Yeah, I don't think I initially appreciated the Torrential Gearhulk Settle the Wreckage combo. Slash of Talons is some new Ixalan action. I think this card is quietly going to be a very solid sideboard card for blue-white decks.
An excellent sideboard card. The fact that it's an instant is a big deal. Not just, obviously the Gearhulk, whatever, but the fact that you can do it on the Kenra or any other haste creature, being able to hit the Kenra right out the gate, or the Odd-Crop Crasher,
or Bomat Courier.
Bomat Courier, such a great tempo play.
Oh yeah, I think that Slash of Talons is just very quietly going to be one of the most important staples for blue-white. It's so not ostentatiously powerful, but it does the thing that blue-white isn't good at against the deck that it isn't good against, right? It allows you to interact with speed against the red deck, which has so much haste, and to do so even on turn 1. Things I'm surprised about on this high-performing deck, he never even goes to the 4 Fumigates anywhere, right? And then that's one, and then separately, no Authority of the Councils.
Well, why would he go for the Fumigates? He has the fourth Settle the Wreckage in the sideboard.
Yeah, he does.
No, I don't know. I'm just kidding. Because I still like Authority of the Councils. And actually, Jim Davis's 5th place list featured a full playset.
Yeah, I think there's different ways you can go with the sweepers. Like I was saying before, I was messing around with that 8 casting cost dinosaur, and the reason I decided to just even try that strategy is because the thing I was more worried about is decks like Sultai or Temur bringing in Spell Pierces and Negates after sideboarding, or certainly Sultai's got Duresses, right? So usually when you're the approach deck, you actually have to cast a bunch of spells to stay alive, then use those spells to bridge to the point that you can cast your big approach to the second sun or whatever to win. But this does a twofold thing. One of them, they can't interact with it very well at all. They don't have real hard counters, so they can't stop you from casting a big creature. And then separately, it actually just gives you a 7/7 to try to win the game with. But there's just different ways that you can go, and it looks like Jim has also farm as a interact with creatures.
Farm to market, yeah.
Yeah. So farm to market, the front side is called farm. It's 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature. Right, so it's a kind of inefficient front side creature interaction card, and then market is a sorcery for 2 and a blue. It's an aftermath card. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. So it's like dig spell, but it's free because it's out of your graveyard.
Yeah. It's solid. You need to have something to round out. It's just it's so often you end up in a spot of just the 3 spot is so coveted.
Yeah, the one thing I thought was interesting about both of these blue-white approach decks, even though they're pretty differently constructed for 2 decks that are trying to get to the same place ultimately, is that both players re-embraced Aether Meltdown. So Aether Meltdown was a card that was played at 3 or 4 of in the initial versions of blue-white approach, but was largely optimized out as the format went on. But I think Aether Meltdown is way better than it was before because there's no longer the non-bow with Blessed Alliance.
Yeah, but there is the Nambo now with Search, where it's not actually putting a card in your graveyard, so your search flips slower. But yeah, I still like it. You need something. You got to have some 2-cost removal.
I've been using Renewed Faith in that spot, which is just kind of like, it doesn't remove a creature, but it does the job of kind of blunting an attack, which is similar to what a removal spell would do, while digging you deeper into your deck for a more meaningful card. That might be wrong. But it's been pretty good for me. The thing that I liked about it is going long once you've flipped your search for Escanta. It's actually really cool to be in a spot where you're using your Library of Alexander land to go get spells and just actually casting cards like that, that you have such riches in your grip.
Sure. So even though Andrew and Dan Jessup crushed the event with Sultai, the identical copies of Sultai Energy, there were a couple 4-color Energy decks in the top 8 as well. Gabriel Nichols and Gabriel Nichols' list was no hostage takers, man.
I mean, maybe he just didn't get the memo. Right, like that's probably not going to be the case. If you were to play the same strategy next weekend, he's already got black for the Scarab God. He's probably going to make some refinement there. But look at his list; he's only got 3 Bristling Hydras. I mean, he's kind of torn at the 4 already.
Are these Cartouche of Ambitions real?
They are.
Wow. Man, what do you want Cartouche of Ambition against?
I don't know. I had never occurred to me to try them.
I guess you're putting it down for the lifelink.
Yeah,
right.
I think
if you put it on the Whirler Virtuoso against a red deck, or you put it on the Hydra.
Yeah, but
when you come down, it kills with their Kenra or something with the -1/-1, and then you're giving your Bristling Hydra +1/+1 and lifelink.
It's real fancy. I think maybe what if you put it on a 1/1 flyer, right? Like, you could still kill a Kenra or Bomat Courier or something, but you have this guy who's getting in and like, lifelinking from the sky. I think that's not the worst. I don't know, it seems like an odd choice to me, though. Like, not because the effect is so undesirable. I can really imagine wanting to just get +1/+1 and lifelink on one of the big creatures. The thing that I'm a little queasier on this, especially when he's got Aethersphere Harvester already, which has a similar effect, is that it's in his splash color, right? This deck has all of 1 swamp and 4 Aether hubs,
a Blooming Marsh, 4 Attune with Aether,
but
4 Servant of the Conduit.
But the thing is that the implication is this card is... No, it's a pressure card. Like, you need to have this card on time.
Yeah, and okay, from playing 4-color Energy a bunch this week, one of the things, and I've been playing it a bunch, one of the things I found is that Attune with Aether, I'll get the Swamp, is one of the best cards you can have in your deck. Like, you could, in theory, ever get anything besides the Swamp as well. You never do, though. You just go get the Swamp, because what in the world would you tell your children if they were to say, Daddy, how did you not have enough mana to cast the Scarab God?
I got a mountain on turn 1, honey.
Yeah. But, dude, what do you think of playing Cartouche of Ambition alongside Trial of Ambition and Cartouche of Knowledge in some kind of a deep root champion deck?
Now, I know that it's been a project of yours to try to figure out how to get deep root champion, kind of maximize that guy in, I don't know, in standard or probably in standard now, right? I don't know. Those are all cards that are going to give him action.
Dude, Cartouche of Ambition is a great card to put on the deep root champion.
Yeah, he's got all the buffs at once, right?
Right, and if you're bouncing all those trials, if you're bouncing the trials, then man, that's extra +1/+1 counters.
Also, you can get some bodies without having to invest in creature spells.
Yeah, and getting to play, this might finally be the deck that can take advantage of Rogue Refiner. Like, if you've just got
finally there's going to be a deck with Rogue Refiner.
Right. Yeah, we could put like Rogue Refiner and Hostage Taker and the Scarab God. Because, like, you know what the Scarab God needs? It's Cartouche of Ambition.
Patrick.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little something about Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah.
He went out and he wanted to
Jean-Luc Picard.
Search for new life and new civilizations. But there was one thing that he had to guide himself on when he went and found those new civilizations.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the Prime Directive. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, he's just like, hey, we got some good shells for the Scarab God Rogue Refiner Hostage Taker decks. Not sure if we should go the mono cartouche route at the same time.
I'm not talking about mono cartouches, man. I'm just saying you could use some.
I think you could just have a simpler strategy with some all awesome cards.
Are you telling me that Trial of Ambition isn't awesome?
I think that I get personally excited thinking about combining trials and cartouches, but I'm not sure how much of that is cute and how much of that is good.
Dude, the ambitions. So the cartouches are the hard part. Once you have the cartouche, the trial is the easy part, man. I don't know. How about, dude? I gotta decompress, man. How about some Grixis?
Yeah.
Scott McNamara's 10th place list: 3 Torrential Gearhulk, 3 the Scarab God. This is a lot like the list we talked about in previous weeks, but it's going the blue-red splash the Scarab God route instead of blue-black.
I'm actually a little surprised at the mana base of this deck that he didn't play. What's the new Ghost Quarter land?
The ruins, the field ruins, or whatever.
Yeah, I would have thought that this of all the there were some in I think one of the blue white decks we looked at, but didn't point it out at the time. this of all the decks that we've seen is the one that I would have thought would be playing that.
Dude, I love that card anyway, but I think it is actually a reasonable way to fix your mana.
Yeah, like it's a ramp card. Like,
it's not really a ramp card, but it does get you your black, I don't know that you need 4 Aether Hub, 4 Canyon Sloth, 4 Drowned Catacombs. That's a lot of black. But, I do appreciate the sideboard containing Battle at the Bridge in addition to Doomfall and Duress.
What do you think about no Search for Azcanta in this deck? Like, especially with Torrential Gearhulk.
I don't like it as much as some Search for Azcanta in this deck.
Yeah, because I would really like some Search for Azcanta in this deck.
I would rather have Search for Azcanta in this deck than not have Search for Azcanta in this deck.
Especially when I was playing, all my creatures are exploiting the graveyard. I would really like some Search for Azcanta. Dude,
I can't get into Opt. I'm sorry. Yeah. I can't. I don't know. Maybe. I don't love it, man. I want to play. But then again, I'm not Glimmer of Geniusing either. I just want to play Hieroglyphic Illumination and Search for Azcanta.
So I think that in a deck like this, I would much rather have 4 Hieroglyphic Illumination than 4 Opt. Like, Hieroglyphic Illumination at 1 is only a little worse than Opt. Oftentimes when you're using Hieroglyphic Illumination, like it's not uncommon that you'll cycle it on turn 1. You don't necessarily even know what you would want at this point in the game. You're just using it to utilize your mana and then just get your deck going, possibly because you had to search for Azcanta, possibly because you're going to set up for Torrential Gearhulk later. Having one of those 2 cards in the graveyard for a later Torrential Gearhulk, obviously Opt is the way worse one to have in the graveyard. And you don't necessarily have time. That's the thing. Like, you're like, oh, no, you would just have a better option. But you might not have a better option. Like, if you're going to use... You have a 1-turn window to use Opt or Hieroglyphic Illumination on turn 1, then you're just, like, hurling removal cards for the next couple of turns. And then you're like, okay, take a breath, Torrential Gearhulk. And the best thing you could have is that Hieroglyphic Illumination from turn 1, right? Like, you don't necessarily want to flash back in a Braid when you have, like, this huge creature to block or something. And I think that comes up fairly often.
So actually, speaking of Gearhulks, what do you think of Brennan DeCandio moving his Cataclysmic Gearhulks to the sideboard to make room for a couple of copies of Vona, Butcher of Megan? And this is in Esper Gift. And this new breed of Esper deck, another 4 Hostage Taker, hell yeah list. And then also Chart a Course.
Yeah, so tons of stuff to talk about in Brennan's deck. Tons of stuff coming from Ixalan. So two copies of Chart a Course in the main deck. The only thing I dislike about that is that there's only 2 copies, right? So This is a perfect Chart a Course deck. Like,
yep.
If you think back to some of the red versions of God Pharaoh's Gift from past formats, we would see the inferior red versions of Chart a Course. Whether it was Cathartic Reunion, whether it was Tormenting Voice here, Chart a Course is just better, right? That's one thing. I've never been
what about the Squire, though, dude?
So the Squire, so Seeker Squires.
I like this guy so much.
1 and a B for a 1/2. Black creature, but he's got Explore. Yeah, what do you like about him?
So, like 40% of the time, the cantrip, that's all you could ever want is just a body. Like, now that you don't have the neonate and any of that kind of turbo stuff, like, you just want to have some creatures that do something that come down in the first 2 turns of the game. And the Seeker, if it's a cantrip guy, it's great whether it's a speed bump or it's trading with something or anything else. It's helping keeping the flow like the card flow going early on with something that you can just have be expendable, so you can get your graveyard full enough to use the God Pharaoh's Gift Gate thing. And then second, even when you miss, you're still scrying. And you're scrying to your graveyard. So the Seeker Squire actually lets you put, like you look at the top of your deck, and all the times where you hit a land, you're already happy. You just cantripped and you have better than an Elvish Visionary. But then when you don't hit a land, look at some of the cards. Vona, Butcher of Magan, would love to have it in the graveyard. And in fact, all those creatures are excellent cards to put in the graveyard.
I mean, God-Pharaoh's Gift is excellent to put into the graveyard.
Exactly. That's the thing, is when you put a creature or the God-Pharaoh's Gift into the graveyard, that's half the deck is a great thing to put. It's like you got to loot. And then finally, the only times that it like quote unquote burns you or whatever is when the top of your deck is a Fatal Push or a Charter Course. And in spots where when it's Fatal Push or Charter Course, or I guess Gate to the Afterlife, you're still getting the option to either have that card. Fatal Push is a great card to have the option to have it now or get rid of it. And when you want it, it's so good, and when you don't want it, it's so dead. So again, it's like you looted.
I mean, I think that if you have a third land in your hand, presuming you're playing Seeker Squire in the second turn, just leaving Fatal Push on top of your deck is often just great anyway.
Yeah, and this is to say nothing of the 2/3 that the Seeker Squire gets, which can actually be a very relevant body in this format.
Oh yeah, it's very solid. I think you're right. This card's pretty good. The one thing that I think is super missing in this deck, which I think this deck is just an embarrassment of riches, right? So Brendan's got Hostage Taker in an all new context. This is actually a really cool utilization of Hostage Taker. He's got Vona, Butcher of Magan, only room for 2 Charter Course and 3 Fatal Push. Dude, Trophy Mage is hella missing here, right? Like,
it is missing. It's not the end of the world, though, man.
No, it's not the end of the world. Darlings. Is it? I think of that card as an essential. Maybe
I like Trophy Mage, but I'm not convinced it's essential.
I mean, I'm looking, who would I cut, right? You don't cut Walking Ballista. You don't cut Angel of Invention. You don't cut Champion of Wits. Hostage Taker is the new thing. Minister of Inquiry. I've never been impressed with Minister of Inquiry.
No, you must have Minister.
All right, if we must have Minister, ain't nobody we can cut.
Vona.
Yeah?
Maybe, I don't know, man.
See,
it's
the thing
tough.
is,
it's tight.
Vona's good in like 2 different spots, and it's really good on the back end, but you never get to the back end sometimes if you don't have Trophy Mage. That's the thing. So, not to be critical, that guy seems missing to me, because I think this is a real inventive list. I do think it feels a little light on mana, and I think that two more Charter Course would make me feel a lot more comfortable there.
I think you might also be underestimating how much the Seeker Squire helps you fix your mana.
Yeah, because
well, when you draw the land, you drew a land 24% or 40% of the time or whatever. But then when you don't draw the land, if you needed the land, you're still getting to scry.
Yep.
So like it's like a cantrip for the purpose of fixing your mana.
It's all that stuff. You know what I really like about this deck? If he has to, he can just make it into like a black-blue board control deck after sideboarding. Just like side in those Vraska's Contempts and Scarab Gods and just kind of play a way more legitimate game instead of like this kind of engine game.
Well, definitely, although to pivot to a completely different engine endgame, dude, Zach L6 Grixis improvised deck.
Oh, first place in the Classic.
Yes.
You've got so many Grixis to talk about this week. This has got to be like you're a little kid and it's December 24th for you.
Well, it depends on whether you see this as really being kind of like a series of pagan holiday rituals, or if it's more just about the original meaning and the spirit of giving and seeking the answers both inside yourself and in the world that you're connected with at one. And
I was kind of thinking more about unwrapping treasures and being happy with the red, black, and blue things you found inside.
Oh, sorry, I forgot you're from New York. Yeah. So this list is it's a Herald of Anguish Maverick Thopterist list, and Tezzeret the Schemer, that whole thing, with Contraband Kingpin as an additional sort of quote payoff, and then a couple new cards. He's got Sorcerer's Spyglass.
And more Sorcerer's Spyglass in the sideboard.
Main deck Sorcerer's Spyglass, which is the 2-cost artifact. As it enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities.
So this card's a little confusing. When you play Sorcerer's Spyglass, you can name a card that's not in their hand, right? It's
Correct.
any card name, right? So it's a little confusing. So, for example, let's say you know that they have, I don't know, Gideon of the Trials in their deck somewhere, whether or not it's in their hand, and you don't want to get wrecked by that card, right? You can just name that card when you play Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Right. And but you could be in the spot where you're like, well, I was planning on naming Gideon, but you took a sneak peek at their hand, and you're like, well, he's got Chandra in his hand.
Let's kind of pivot a little bit.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll be like, my plan is I'm going to hit Chandra or I'm going to hit Ramen Up Ruins anyway or something. And then you and because you can name Ramen Up Ruins even though it's a land. It just doesn't stop Ramen Up Ruins from tapping for mana. It just means you can't use the activated ability to do damage.
But that's good.
And then, but you might look at their hand and be like, oh, you know, like I wasn't planning on naming, say, Scrap Heap Scrounger or something, or Hazaret. That's another one, is being able to name Hazaret it doesn't mean you want to, but you might look at their hand and be like, it might be time to pivot.
So, I think that this is maybe only the first step in what we might see for kind of mass artifact improvised decks coming out of the new format.
Well, at the very least, he doesn't have any hostage takers in his deck yet.
Yeah, so it could get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I would consider playing some hostage takers.
I mean, to be fair, hostage taker it's a little off label for this deck. This deck
what do you mean?
It's only got 21 lands, and it's not really synergistic with the deck.
What? Steal an artifact? Didn't you have one more? What else do you want?
I don't know. Hostage taker is sweet.
I don't know why people are just so afraid to play more hostage takers and the Scarab Gods. Like, they just made a couple of some of the cards are just so much better than the other cards. You can just play with them. You can just do that. That's just allowed.
Yeah, like Hostage Taker is it's like there was a time in Extended when Faceless Butcher was the best card in Extended. And I know that's like hard to believe, right? But Hostage Taker starts off as a card that's just better than Faceless Butcher.
Oh, yeah.
And then like it's like kind of all the best of Faceless Butcher and Gonti at the same time. And they even made it blue to remind you should play it.
So what did you think of the dinosaur deck? The 45th place Alex Fan playing green-red dinosaurs in the Open. In the Open? Yeah, so this list, he starts off, this is just straight red-green. He starts off with Otepec, Huntmaster, and Drover of the Mighty. So he's got a couple of the accelerators at 2. In order to go into his 4 is Ripjaw Raptor with Samit the Tested as an alternative option. And obviously, if his accelerator dies, he still has Deathgorge Scavenger. And then he's got your boy Regisaur Alpha at 5 and Carnage Tyrant at 6.
So what I really like about this kind of schema that Alex used to build his deck is that it's like so not fancy, right? He's just got 4 of all this stuff except for his Planeswalker, which is, semi-legendary, or I guess it's fully legendary now, and Carnage Tyrant, which is, way at the top of the curve. And the reason I like this is, even when you're playing like Commune with Dinosaurs, which is kind of a search card, he could just like hit his land drop and then tap all of his land for whatever the biggest threat he drew so far is. Versus spending time and cards to go find a specialty card, right? So a different way of building dinosaurs might be to play only one Regisaur Alpha, but play one of a bunch of different things, tutor up using, maybe a white tutor or commune with dinosaurs, which takes more time, right? This way, just like on turn 3, if I've got an accelerator, I can just play my best 4, right? Same thing for the next turns coming up. And I think there's an advantage to that strategy if you want to. It's like if you want to play a certain way, right? There's multiple ways you can play, and this is the way I think that, given a limited amount of time, you would be able to apply the most pressure and the most power on somebody.
There's a couple other cool little synergies that I think are worth highlighting. The commune with dinosaurs, while it's all 4-ofs for the most part, and obviously it's kind of nice to find one of those Carnage Tyrants. The 1 Ramen Up Ruins and 2 Haship Oasis have the ability to feel like a lot more when your commune is able to look for them. And because of how much discipline there was in not just loading up with that stuff, he's taking less damage from his lands, and his Rootbound Crags are coming into play untapped more often. And then Samet the Tested does a lot of cool things. Even though the Odapek Huntmaster can't, it doesn't make it cheaper. Samet the Tested's Double Strike is excellent on Carnage Tyrant. And of course, it also works with other stuff like Ripjaw Raptor, whatever. But like just being able to Carnage Tyrant and take advantage of it being hexproof, so your investment is secure, and trample, so that extra double strike damage gets through. That's all nice, particularly when you can give the Carnage Tyrant haste with the Odapek Cutmaster. But then also, Samet the Tested's ability to do 2 damage split up. Dude, what else do you want in life but to hit two of your own Ripjaw Raptors with a Samet?
Well, I think that the positioning of Samet's really, really strategic here. So one of the things Alex can do is play the big dinosaur first, even though Samet is cheaper than many of the big dinosaurs, and then play Samet second. So like you said, because Carnage Tyrant has hexproof, that's a very sound strategy, right? Like, play my giant hexproof guy, now play Samet, give my giant hexproof guy, double strike, probably going to get in for a ton on that turn without exposing the Planeswalker.
Right, and this isn't even counting the prospect of like Savage Stomp, which you're getting paid double on because of the double strike. You remember though, Carnage Tyrant's going to have haste a lot of the time. Between 4 Regisaur Alpha and 4 Odapek Huntmaster, this is a deck that's going to play a lot like a red-green Fires deck. And then Deathgorge Scavenger takes on new meaning when it has haste. And with 8 ways to give it haste, I mean, you can put down the Deathgorge Scavenger, bump it to a 5/4, attack, and then, so you bump it to a 4/3, then you attack, and you bump it to a 5/4.
Yeah, for 3, that's pretty substantial.
Right, or just gain 4 life right away. So I think this is a cool, very, very cool list.
Yeah, but do you agree with like just playing all these 4-ofs and then just tapping out for whatever your best thing is every turn? It's just like a different way of looking at this strategy than, a tutor-based one or a kind of a surgically based.
Yeah, I think I like the more 4-of style that's so reminiscent of the Fires of Yavimaya stuff. Fires of Yavimaya, you don't want to like dilute your deck with like a bunch of tutors and stuff. You want to have redundancy. You want to have your accelerators. You want to have a good curve of threats, and you want to have just a little bit of interaction, and that's it.
The only thing I don't like about this deck is kind of its positioning right now. This deck is ill-prepared from my perspective to deal with a Scarab God. And once a Scarab God is online against this deck, I don't know what it does. Because these creatures are really good. I know
exactly what it does.
What's that? It super stinks when your creatures are this good, right? And then your opponent has the Scarab God. Like, oh, Regisaur Alpha. I'd like one of those. This is not gonna turn out well when the opponent has like blossoming defense. Like, how bad is it when you're like, all right, I'm just gonna try to like tempo rumble in, and they're like, Scarab God, you're not quite big enough for this combat. Let's see what we can do about that. Like, oh no, it's that is what I don't like about the dinosaurs right now. The black and blue. All right, super exciting first week out for Standard. I love how some of these decks have shaken out even just in the first week. I think it's cool that Sultai ended up on top. Like you said, the Jessups are just awesomely crushed this tournament. Yep.
And I'm hoping that the metagame evolves a bit more, because at the moment it's seeming kind of just, energy is a little bit louder than... like there's a lot of decks that look sort of like decks from before, but with some new cards and new tech. And as far as first weeks go, this is very promising. But I'm hoping that we see even more evolution away from all this.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Right? The first week decks often inform the future weeks, but rarely are they just the decks that stick around forever. I mean, when we were on the Pro Tour about a year ago, right? Like, Grixis Control was the top deck at the Pro Tour, and just a few weeks later in Standard, it was nowhere to be seen. Versus Blue White Spirits and Mardu Vehicles and some of the other stuff that came out. So I think that probably the Sultai deck is going to be somewhat enduring because, like you said, that Splinter Twin combo is really compelling. But maybe we'll see it in different contexts also.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thank you guys all for joining us again this week. And you can share us on social media, do all the usual Facebook and YouTube, and of course, Michael J's personal favorite, the Patreon. It
is my personal favorite. And this week, my personal favorite patron is Jason Garcia Trevino.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for helping make it possible for us to be here every week.
But, everyone, we love all of you. All of you patrons, all of you listeners. Thanks for tuning in this week.
Yep, gotta go help Raptor get ready for Worlds. And, hopefully this weekend we're going to see some fireworks.
So you have a friend named Raptor in a format about dinosaurs. Tailor-made World Championship for the former U.S. champion. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game